This is SSN
Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Toronto Region Board of Trade's Hit Go podcast. I'm the board's president and CEO, Jan De Silva. The Toronto region gets a lot of flack for acting as if it's the center of the universe. But when it comes to innovative startup technology, we kind of are. Jokes aside, Canada's currently ranked 4th behind the US, UK, and Israel for momentum of global startup ecosystems. At a city level, Toronto is naturally on top. It's 24th in the world for getting a startup off the ground. 24 is great, but obviously there's room to improve, especially when it comes to capitalizing on the tech solutions for the climate economy. This 4th episode addresses just that. We bring together Sahar Sam, the co-founder and chief science officer of Solaires Entreprises, which is revolutionizing solar cells through the invention solar ink, which can coat many different types of surfaces. Incredible stuff. And Stuart Lombard, the CEO of ecobee. This company continues to be extremely successful with its smart cameras, thermostats, switches, and sensors. Millions of ecobee products in workplaces and households are making significant positive changes to our energy consumption. Craig Rattan is our host as always. He's an alumnus of the board and passionate climate policy expert. You'll hear him drawing out the key ingredients to Stuart and Sahar's success, how global competitors perceive Canadian cleantech companies, and ways to address adoption challenges, and much more. We hope you enjoy this episode and leave inspired.
Why don't we start by just giving our listeners a 30-second glance and an explanation of understanding what each of your companies does. And Sahar, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, hi, Craig. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sahar, and I'm the Chief Science Officer and co-founder of Solaire. And to give you a little bit of what Solaire does, maybe I can start with telling the audience that converting sun's energy to electricity has been around for more than 50 years. And using conventional solar photovoltaic panels is something that we have seen for a long time, I would say. However, the complex supply chain and the energy-intensive mining and purification process of the key materials, and also the dependency of large-size real estates and sunny real estates limit the growth of this industry. So what we do at Solaire is that we are developing the next generation of photovoltaics or solar panels with a simpler and shorter value chain that, unlike current bulky and heavy panels, they are light and flexible, which allow us to use them and install them in places such as building envelope and electric vehicles. These are the places that usually the conventional solar panels cannot be easily installed. Also, these new generation of solar panels, we can generate electricity or power from not only the sunlight, but also the indoor light or any type of light. So that's the new type of kind of technology that we're developing so that we can increase the amount of power that can be generated by any sort of light.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Sahar, and look forward to getting into that more. Before we do, Stuart, tell us about ecobee.
Yeah, that's very cool. First of all, I'll start with that. Thank you for that. That's super cool. So ecobee, our mission is to help people live simpler, better, and more sustainable lives. And one of the insights we had was that heating and cooling is 40 to 70% of your home's energy use. And so actually better managing your heating and cooling is one of the easiest, cheapest things you can do. But the products in the market at the time were impossible to use and were dumb as a doorknob. And we thought, if we could take this device, that was really an unloved device. That was really, everyone was trying to get the cheapest device possible into your home, and we could change it and connect it to the internet and use data like weather and energy prices, make it phenomenally easy to use. Like, how much better could we do? And, the very cool part is that, we estimate our customers have saved enough energy to take the city of Los Angeles and Chicago off the grid for a year. And so, it's a massive impact, over 27 terawatt hours of power. And so very, very cool. So our core business is smart thermostats. We're also in smart security. And so those are really sort of the two core places where we play today.
Thanks, Stuart. And yeah, another company with massive impact. One of the things I'm wondering, a lot of people have great ideas, but few can turn them into a successful commercial company like both of you are doing. So what was that journey like for you? How did you find the way to turn this idea into a functional company?
So that's a very interesting question, because I guess it's kind of like there will be similarity, but also like some differences between like different companies and also different products. But maybe I can start by saying that every entrepreneur should be aware of three famous T's: time, team, traction. So in terms of being able to turn a good idea to a good business, we have to do some research at the beginning to figure out, first of all, this idea, what is the problem that this idea is going to solve, and how big that problem is, and is this the right time to have this idea? Sometimes we're ahead of ourselves, sometimes we're a little behind. So we just have to find the right time and the right problem for the idea that we have. And that's the first step. And during that step, maybe one thing that can happen to a lot of us is that we fall in love with the technology. I come from, basically, I'm the chief science officer, so I love the technology, and it's like my baby. So if someone tells me that like your technology doesn't work or your technology has to be modified, I can't be offended. It's like someone tells me that your baby is ugly, but I have to be open. I can't just say that, no, this is what I have. I just want to fit this technology the way it is without making any changes. So that's the lesson that I learned. And I think I should share that with everybody else, that like, yes, the technology is great, but like it could be serve more people, or it could be greater if we are open to receive feedback and we can modify the technology that we built. So that was definitely something that I have learned. And I believe that some other people also have experienced it in a way or another. And that can cause to something that we call it pivot. Sometimes we have an idea, but then we change the idea, and now we have like a better idea how to use our technology to serve like a kind of a bigger market. And then the next T is team. So now you have a good idea, you know how to use it, you know where to use it. You have to build a good team. If you don't have a good team, that would be very difficult to actually build a business around the idea that you have. And a good team always doesn't mean to have the person or hire the person that has years of experience in corporations. Sometimes people that have grew and learned and worked in big corporation, it's very difficult for them to work in startup, although they have lots of experience. So you have to always find the person that has the experience, but it also has a good fit and good match for the culture of the company that you have. Otherwise, you find yourself dealing with the problem that your team caused just because they, clash with each other, rather than spending time on solving bigger problem that how to build a business. So team is also, of course, like another thing that we have to work on. And then if you have the right idea and a good team and right team, then you will bring the traction. They will bring the traction. And that's how you basically grow the company. I think for me, it was just these three steps that we're still like working on it. But I think that definitely has to be there as a fundamental to build a business.
The three T's, it's a great formula. Stuart, what did it look like from your side?
hard. I don't know in a word. I think those were really great points. So I'll start by saying that. I think people ask me, like, why are you doing thermostats? Nobody cares about thermostats. And by the way, what are you going to do 6 months from now? And the implication was that thermostats were already as good as they were ever going to be, right? And, we've been at it 15 years and, we're talking about sensor fusion and machine learning and AI and, vision and, voice and all these technologies, optimizers and, ML and AI and et cetera, et cetera. And it's really about, what you put into it and your enthusiasm level and your willingness, I think, to learn over time. That's kind of like, I think, a core piece. And culture is really important because I think hiring for people who are, continuous learners, who set a high bar is one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is really around resiliency. We were rejected for venture capital, I think 174 times. And, when we started, we invented the category, we invented the smart thermostat, and all the venture capitalists, virtually all the venture capitalists said, no one will ever spend more than $50 on a thermostat. Like, you're out to lunch, forget it. There's no market here and nobody cares anyway. And then of course, Nest came out, midway through, and then it was like, yeah, of course, everyone's going to spend $250 for a thermostat. That's obvious, but Nest has already won. And so, you should go home and, fail fast and, the world is over. Do something productive with your life because this is clearly not a productive endeavor anymore. And so, one of the things, credit the team, I think really, two things happened. One was a great deal of resiliency and sort of a commitment to, to take this idea and really take it to the next level. And then to learn from it, right? And I tell people, like, before Nest came out, we were high-fiving each other and people told us how great we were and all that kind of stuff. And, we bought into it and, my head was as big as a pumpkin and all that kind of stuff. And then of course Nest came out and then people were like, oh my God, you guys are actually losers, right? And, what we realized was that, we were champions of the North Toronto Minor Bantam Hockey League, but we thought we were playing in the NHL and we'd won the Stanley Cup, but really we were in the wrong league. And so that sort of kicked off a whole thing about, like, what does it take to be really, really good and what does good mean? And I remember people used to say to us, like, why don't you make your thermostats beautiful like Nest, right? And that, like, just hurt me, like, so badly. And it wasn't that we didn't try, right? We tried, but we didn't know how, right? And that idea of, like, there's a difference between wanting to be good and being good and what it really takes to be really, really great. Was one of the journeys that we went through that was, really important, I think, in the development of the business and forced us to really set a high bar and that idea of having a worthy competitor and somebody who really pushes you to the limit. That was a really important part in our development.
I think I love the resiliency. That's very important. I'm glad that you counted how many no's you had. I bet that we probably are around the same, if not more. But yeah, it's definitely, sometimes I feel like every day I have to, like, wear my armor, put my glove box on and just, like, get ready. Yeah, it's punch is coming left and right. Just be ready for that. And you have to, like, be able to stand up again. Yeah, take a deep breath and move forward. So yeah, resiliency is very important.
I'd like to zoom out to sort of the national level, beyond your companies and thinking about this whole, the Cleantech ecosystem, the climate economy writ large in Canada. The Toronto Board of Trade has a vision for Canada to lead in the climate economy and developing and exporting these world leading solutions, using them here and selling them abroad. So if we do want to lead in this economy, what are the ingredients you think we need on a national level? Stuart, can I kick that one over to you first?
Sure. I think there are a few different ingredients. I think we're doing very well in a number of those places. So I think from creating talented, technical group of people, we've done a very good job there. I think there are, some great schools, some great, infrastructure from a learning point of view, which is really, really important. I think encouraging an entrepreneurial class is really, really important. And I think, one of the reasons Silicon Valley is because there is such a, strength of that, entrepreneurial class and people going into entrepreneurship, in the in the 90s, for example, if you saw like a graduating MBA class, for example, they all went into investment banking and management consulting. Now those classes are going into startups, right? And we need some of that here, because that entrepreneurial spirit is really, really important for coming up with new ideas and starting new things. I think we need some government programs that support the development of technologies that need to be solution agnostic, right? And I think, some of the challenges we have now is that some of the programs that are in place, there is someone in Ottawa who's picking whether you're a winner or a loser, right? And, my question is, if you're a venture capitalist and you can't pick, a winner or a loser, and you're paid an outrageous amount of money to do it, and you're wrong 90% of the time, what's the likelihood that someone in Ottawa will be able to do it? And so I think, when you look at programs that are, that allow, entrepreneurs to determine, what the business should be, they should share the risk. So it shouldn't be a blank check. And I would say things like, the research and development credits are a good example of that. As an entrepreneur, you have to take the risk, you have to spend the money, government shares in the response, but you can do whatever you want, right? It's not that someone says like, hey, you know what? I don't think this, flexible solar panels thing is going to go anywhere, so I'm not going to give you the funding, right? And I think, it's hard for people to predict, which are the solutions that are going to ultimately win. And it's a lot of trial and error, and a lot of companies have pivots in them. And so you want to create a lot of flexibility, and you want to create programs that are easy to start. I mean, some of the programs that we looked at historically, the application process was 18 months, right? Like as a startup, if I have to wait 18 months to find out whether I'm approved or not, like I'm so far out of business, I'm not even going to start. And so I think that's important. And then I think, if you set sort of clear regulatory guidelines on things like carbon markets, prices for, renewable power, those types of things, that enables, others to make long-term investments, knowing that there's stability and that those markets will be there, when the technology arrives. And so I would say, those 3 or 4 things I think are really, really important.
The PV industry or solar industry needs to have an annual growth of 25%. But the reality is that with the traditional PV industry, we won't be able to get to that growth, which means that government needs to support the new technologies. And I'm not saying my technology, I'm saying that it's just an example that we have to support the new technologies, because with the current and traditional technologies, we won't get there. And the support, as again, Stuart gave a great example. We do have support in Canada. We talked about all these credits for research and development credit, but it takes a lot of time. I have to actually hire people to be able to write those grants and write the claims and respond to every month kind of assessment, which is again taking a lot of time. Sometimes I get approved for the grants a year and a half after what I applied, that by that time I don't need that money and I don't need to do that project because I pivoted. So these are the issues that I think it needs to be considered if we really need to make a big change in the country. It has to happen like from some basics and fundamentals of supporting new innovations.
Thanks. Yeah, I think those insights really help make it real for me in terms of understanding, the timelines, that the government timelines are not meeting up with the speed that startups and scale-ups need to move at. And if you want to embrace innovation, then it is going to require, it's the companies are already trying to do things differently, and you need government to be able to respond to that environment too.
Yeah, I think, one opportunity is procurement, right? And so, there are a number of models, where, governments or funds will, pre-buy the output of a technology before it arrives, right? And so they're doing this in carbon capture. Stripe has a fund with Google and Facebook. I can't remember what it's called, but the basic idea is that as an entrepreneur, they'll come to you. They'll either give you a grant if they, if you're early and they believe your technology is promising, or in the case of carbon capture, they'll buy your carbon reductions in the future, so that you can then go to a more traditional investor and say, we already know that if we deliver this, we have a customer. We still have to deliver it and all those kinds of things, but it creates certainty around the technology. And so I think there's some really novel models around, how you can seed some of these technologies through things like, advanced procurement and those types of things that, balance, I think, risk of, government being on the front page where, we gave a bunch of money to, to a couple startups and it got incinerated, and, helping entrepreneurs really, grow significant businesses. And so I think there's lots of really interesting models that are possible in order to support this sector.
Yeah, let's keep talking a bit more about procurement, because I think it is a really challenging issue. And I hear you talk about some of the new models that are available, and I guess I'm wondering, how much of it is it the models that the government has employed or is willing to employ versus just sort of, I guess, the attitude and culture of being like really risk averse by nature.
Yeah, I think in fairness to governments, they have a responsibility to taxpayers. They want to make smart choices. Some of these technologies are risky, and so I do think that these programs need to have certain balance, right? And thoughtful policy around how we do procurement, and whether it's, we allocate X amount of government funding. And so, maybe it's like 3% of government, procurement will go to, these types of technologies. Ideally they should be, directed, right? So if the government bought, for example, I don't know how much energy they buy, but, they bought $400 million worth of energy. I don't know, 10% would go to, new emerging technologies, an example, as a way to kind of like balance the risk. This particular fund that I'm talking about is $1 billion fund over 10 years, and they're buying, carbon credits out 10 years, right? You could do that again as a way to sort of seed the market, let people know that there is going to be a market for these. And of course, if we don't deliver the goods, then you're not buying the credits and you're not out any money. Conversely, if we buy if we produce the goods, there's a known price for it. And we can, make sure that our economics fit together, and our investors in turn know that there's a customer for it, and that significantly de-risks it. I think venture capital is another way. Like Israel's been, very, very successful in government seeding venture capital funds to then, invest in entrepreneurs. I think that's another really interesting opportunity as well. So there are lots of different ways to go about it, if you will.
Yeah, I totally agree. In terms of like these programs and incentives, I would say that like government has started doing something like here and there. And then I can see that, for example, for some of the provinces, for example, BC have some sort of a tax incentives for investors that are investing in new companies, especially like, yes, it is risky to invest in startups. Everybody knows. And especially like some of the technologies like hard tech, it is always like hard to imagine when they are actually going to go to profit, and when the investors are going to get their money back, or how much return are they going to get. So these are the risks that they're dealing with. But for example, like some provinces have these incentives for investors that if you invest in these sort of companies that are eligible for these incentives, you will get, for example, 30% of your investment money back, just to kind of like have this support for both investors, but also startups, because now investors are feeling a little bit more comfortable investing in the company, and startups needs those basically like initial money to be able to grow their technology. So yeah, I think those programs and incentives has to be, we have some, but maybe like having them more and having them all around Canada would definitely help national wise.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Ontario used to have the labor-sponsored funds as an example, and labor-sponsored funds, very similar model, where as an investor, you got a tax break for investing in those venture funds. At one point, they represented about 30% of the venture capital in Ontario, and so it was a significant, formation of venture capital. Those rules changed and those funds went away, unfortunately. But as an entrepreneur, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. I think it was around 2005. Like that just created like a massive sucking sound, because you took out a third of the venture capital market. But if you looked at the positive side of that, you could create some really significant opportunities by reinstating a program like that as an example, and really do it very quickly, I think.
These are lots of great practical insights about, how we become even more competitive as a country and help, spearhead more solar enterprises and ecobees across Canada. We're almost out of time here, but just before we wrap, wanted to give you each a chance to, say we've talked through a lot of different recommendations for government. If you had sort of one ask on how they approach this to really foster a more innovative clean tech ecosystem here in Canada, the top priority they should really be focused on, what would that be?
I would say support all the time is like a great thing to see from the government, especially like, for example, with the risky kind of technologies. If we see some sort of a support from the government that they purchase that technology so that it's kind of like, or government has some sort of a pilot program for those risky technology, that will definitely help. And the other thing is that maybe at the beginning, Stuart mentioned about programs, like learning programs and things that help the, let's say, startups to grow their business. Yes, we get help to start a business, but then we kind of feel alone. Like they say that, okay, off you go. We help you to start your business and now go figure it out and come back to us when you have revenue, and we support you more when you have revenue. So in between, there is a little bit we see that there's a lack of support for the startups that are trying to grow and scale and they're pre-revenue. So those kind of supports are very much needed.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I think, I would add, low friction funding that, feels really important, just because some of the mechanisms just way too much friction, way too difficult. So low friction funding, I think, would be number one. And then I think for entrepreneurs, I would say, it's not just government, it's also about entrepreneurs. And I think, one thing I would encourage people to do is really around, learning and reinvention. And I think on the journey from, startup to scale up, one of the things that was surprising to me was just, how much I had to reinvent myself, right? And when we started and we were 7 people in a room, I was the CEO, but really I was a product manager. I wasn't really, a CEO in any sense of the word. Now that we're 600 people, what my job is and what I have to be and what we have to be good at is very, very different. And so, maybe put some onus or responsibility, let's say, on both sides, governments to create, sort of frictionless risk funding opportunities, and then entrepreneurs to really work on, continuous learning and reinvention. Because I think, in the journey of success, there were lots of different places where we could have succeeded and failed, but, reinvention of the business, of the people, of the company, of me, was a really important part of that.
Some great words of wisdom to close us out with. Sahar, Stuart, thank you both so much for your time. And look forward to seeing all the great things your companies are going to continue to do.
Thanks for listening to this startup episode of the Hit Go Climate Economy podcast. If Sahar and Stuart's stories sparked a new view of clean tech opportunities in our region, please let us know in a review. While you're at it, be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite platform to receive future episodes. Be sure to share this conversation with your eco-friendly and tech-savvy friends or your entire social network with a tag so we can see your post. Hope you can join us for our 5th and final episode of the Hit Go Climate Economy podcast.
This is Story Studio Network.